Hey there everybody, I'm Joe Disney Guy, and today we're going to try out a new series. We all know about the classic Disney movies and shorts and TV shows, but just as important as the finished product is the people behind the scenes, and I thought that we would honor that by looking at some influential people in Disney history. Today, our first influential person is the man who some say defined the Disney style of animation, Fred Moore. Although he would go on to become one of the most influential animators in Disney history, not much is really known about Fred Moore's upbringing, other than that he was born on September 7, 1911 in Los Angeles, California, and aside from some high school art classes and some art lessons he received in exchange for being a janitor at an art school, Moore was never actually extensively trained in art or animation. And as somebody who took art classes in elementary school and can barely draw stick figures can tell you, art classes in school isn't exactly the same as going to an art institute. Even Moore's arrival at Disney is sort of shrouded in mystery. There are rumors that he submitted drawings to Disney on grocery bags, or that he was never even actually hired and just showed up one day. But the most likely story of how Fred Moore ended up at the Disney studio is that close friend Chuck Couch brought some of Moore's drawings to Walt, who was impressed enough to hire Moore despite the fact that he was only 18 years old. I'm sorry, but that's just too mundane for me. I much prefer the mysterious art savant stories. Almost immediately, Moore began to impress, thanks in large part to his natural ability to draw near-perfect lines for characters and his penchant for working quickly. One of Moore's first real triumphs was in Disney's famous short The Three Little Pigs. Moore was tasked with drawing the introduction to each pig, and managed to make each pig, despite their similar appearances, feel like entirely different characters. Now, at the time, animation was pretty generic. You never really moved the character much unless you needed to for a gag, and the characters never looked or moved all that naturally. In fact, this type of style was actually known as the rubber arm style, just to give you some idea about it. Moore's pigs, however, had a life and an energy that really had never been seen before, and that's why many historians looked at these characters as the first characters to demonstrate the Disney style. A lot of what led to Moore's success was probably the fact that he never had the formal animation training like the other animators. Instead of doing things the same old-fashioned way, he did what looked and seemed natural. Even little things like making cheeks move when a character talked was groundbreaking at the time, and put Fred Moore into a class all by himself in terms of animation. Buoyed by his success with the pigs, Walt began to give important assignments to Moore, especially as the studio began its big move into features. In Snow White, Moore provided the animation for the 7 dwarfs in the bedroom scene, Hi-Ho, and the Silly Song, largely due to his ability to create cute, unique characters with similar designs. Some of Moore's other credits were Lampwick and Pinocchio, the Centaurets in Fantasia, Timothy and Dumbo, and Gus and Jack from Cinderella. So yeah, he kinda had his hand in just about every major release for a while. But probably Moore's biggest contribution during his time in the Disney studios was his changes to Mickey Mouse. When Moore first arrived, he worked with resident Mickey specialist Les Clark. Over time, Moore took the mantle as Mickey's primary animator, to great success, but the issue was, as the Disney style became more prevalent, Mickey began to seem out of place, with his design remaining largely unchanged from his first appearance. When the rebrand of Mickey was called for The Sorcerer's Apprentice, Moore created the new Mickey, complete with full eyes and pupils in order to add more expression. The redesign was so successful that even today it remains Mickey's primary look. But although Mickey is probably what the public best knows Moore for, around the studio, Fred Moore was known for something completely different: Freddie Moore girls. One of Fred Moore's great talents was drawing beautiful, innocent, sexy-looking women, and these drawings became renowned at the Disney studio. They were so popular, in fact, that Moore really became the go-to guy whenever an appealing female character was needed on screen, leading to him getting the nod to animate the Centaurets in Fantasia, the girl in All the Cats Join In, Katrina in The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and the mermaids in Peter Pan. I would show you more of the Freddie Moore girls, but yeah, a lot of them do involve nudity, so I mean, if you want to look them up, be my guest, but I'm going to try to keep PG on here. Unfortunately, the tale of Fred Moore wasn't always a happy or even a successful one. After his triumph with the dwarfs in Snow White, Moore was revered by many of the animators at the Disney studio. In response to this, Walt assigned Moore to try and mentor some of the younger, newer animators. Unfortunately, Moore didn't exactly take this responsibility seriously, goofing off constantly and blowing off his assignments to drink, which naturally angered Walt and caused Moore to be demoted back to animator. Moore also didn't particularly get along well with some of the animators he was assigned to work with, primarily Bill Tytla, mainly due to conflicting egos. And sadly, as time went on, Moore's work ethic began to deteriorate as his drinking steadily rose, leading to him getting divorced at home and actually fired by Walt after Moore's work on Dumbo, a decision that Walt said was one of the toughest things that he had to do. Unfortunately, one of the other major issues for Moore was exactly what led him to be so great in the first place. Where his unique animation style was forged by the fact that he didn't have actual formal animation training, sooner or later, the best animators in the world, like the ones at the Disney studio, are gonna catch up to you. And this took Moore from being one of the best animators around to just another good animator to, as some would argue, actually falling behind as time went on and Disney animation became more and more complex. Moore would work for animator Walter Lantz, helping him out with the design of Woody Woodpecker for 2 years, before Walt decided to bring Moore back for one more chance. Despite some early strong work, Moore once again began to revert to his bad habits. Sadly, we never got to see if Moore could turn it around. On November 22, 1952, Moore and his second wife were driving home from a football game when they got into a head-on collision as Moore's wife was making a U-turn. Fred Moore died the next day from his injuries. Fred Moore really is an interesting person to look at. He's proof that if you're passionate enough and talented enough, you can do anything that you want to, even despite what disadvantages you may have. But sadly, he's also proof of what can happen to a talented individual once they begin to shirk their responsibilities. Fortunately, I think it's safe to say that Fred Moore's legacy in animation far outweighs the personal demons that he had to fight throughout his life. Moore's design of Mickey is still one of the most recognizable animations in history, and his style has influenced countless artists, including almost the entire Disney studio. In fact, when the studio was working on The Little Mermaid in the late 80s, they used Freddie Moore girls to help design Ariel. In 1983, Moore was posthumously awarded the Winsor McKay Award for his contributions to the field of animation, and in 1995, Moore was inducted as a Disney legend. So yes, Fred Moore's story was certainly a tragic tale at times, but it's largely thanks to him that the Disney style is what it is, and without his contributions, who knows what Disney animation would resemble today. Well guys, that wraps it up for me this week. I hope y'all enjoyed, and let me know what you thought about this episode, and if there's anybody in particular who you want me to look at from Disney history, let me know in the comment section below. Also, be sure to check out last week's video and next week's video. And I'll see you all next week.